Welcome to today's episode, where we're about to uncover one of the most underrated military victories in medieval history. A battle so decisive that it shattered the Golden Horde's grip on Eastern Europe forever, yet remains virtually unknown to most of the world. Picture this: autumn 1362. On the banks of the Syniukha River in what is now Ukraine, two vastly different worlds are about to collide. On one side stands the mighty Golden Horde, the western remnant of Genghis Khan's world-conquering empire, rulers of the greatest cavalry force on earth, masters of the steppes who have terrorized Europe for over a century. On the other side, a relatively unknown Grand Duke named Algirdas, leading an army from the forests of Lithuania, a people most Europeans had never heard of, fighting with weapons and tactics that seem primitive compared to the sophisticated Mongol war machine. But here's what makes this story absolutely extraordinary. This wasn't just another border skirmish or minor victory. What happened at the Battle of Blue Waters didn't just defeat a Mongol army. It triggered the complete collapse of the Golden Horde's control over Eastern Europe and fundamentally changed the course of world history. How did a Fars people from the Baltic defeat the heirs of Genghis Khan? What was their secret weapon that turned certain defeat into total victory? And how did this single battle transform a collection of Lithuanian tribes into one of the largest empires in European history, while simultaneously destroying one of the most powerful states of the medieval world? Get ready to discover the shocking truth behind the Battle of Blue Waters, the day the Golden Horde's invincibility died forever. Chapter 1. The Golden Horde at its zenith. Sarai, capital of the Golden Horde, 1340. The morning sun glints off the golden dome of the great mosque as Khan Uzbek surveys his empire from the steps of his palace. Before him stretches a city that rivals Baghdad in its splendor, bustling bazaars, where merchants from China trade with dealers from Venice, workshops where the finest craftsmen in the world create weapons and jewelry, and barracks housing the most feared cavalry force on earth. From this single city, Uzbek controls an empire that dwarfs most European kingdoms. His authority extends from the Ural Mountains to the Carpathians, from the Baltic forests to the Black Sea steppes. When he speaks, princes in Moscow tremble. When his armies move, entire kingdoms flee. For over a century, the Golden Horde has been the undisputed master of Eastern Europe. "My lord," reports his general, kneeling before the throne, "tribute from Moscow has arrived: silver, furs, and 1,000 mounted warriors for your service." The Russian princes remain obedient. Uzbek nods with satisfaction. The system his predecessors built continues to function perfectly. But what the great Khan doesn't realize is that his empire stands on the brink of a catastrophic transformation that will begin with his death and end with the total destruction of everything he has built. The Golden Horde that dominated Eastern Europe in the 14th century represented one of the most successful and enduring political entities to emerge from the Mongol conquests. Founded by Beta Khan, grandson of Genghis Khan, in the 1240s, the Horde had evolved from a nomadic warband into a sophisticated imperial structure that combined Mongol military traditions with complex administrative systems adapted from Chinese, Persian, and Islamic models. At its peak under Khan Uzbek, 1312 to 1341, the Golden Horde controlled territory stretching from the Ural River to the Carpathian Mountains, and from the northern forests of Novgorod to the shores of the Black Sea. This vast domain encompassed the heartland of what would later become Russia, Ukraine, and Kazakhstan, making the Horde one of the largest political entities in the medieval world. The military foundation of Horde power rested on the finest heavy cavalry force of its era. Unlike the earlier Mongol armies that had conquered China and Persia through speed and mobility, the Golden Horde's military had adapted to European conditions by developing more heavily armored units capable of sustained combat against the plate-armored knights of the West. The core of this force consisted of professional warriors drawn from Mongol and Turkic tribes, supported by auxiliary forces recruited from conquered peoples. The organizational structure of horde armies reflected centuries of military evolution. The traditional decimal system units of 10, 100, 1,000, and 10,000 provided clear command hierarchies, while specialized formations handled different tactical requirements. Heavy cavalry formed the striking force, equipped with composite bows, lances, and sabers, while light cavalry provided reconnaissance and pursuit capabilities. Infantry units, often recruited from sedentary populations, handled siege warfare and garrison duties. The economic foundation of the Golden Horde's power derived from multiple sources that made it one of the wealthiest states in medieval Eurasia. The Horde controlled crucial segments of the Silk Road, taxing the lucrative trade between Asia and Europe. Its territories included some of the most productive agricultural regions in Eastern Europe, while the tribute system imposed on conquered peoples provided steady streams of silver, furs, and other valuable commodities. The tribute system itself represented a masterpiece of imperial administration. Rather than attempting direct rule over vast and culturally diverse territories, the Horde developed a sophisticated indirect control mechanism. Local rulers maintained their positions and traditional authority in exchange for regular tribute payments and military service. This system proved remarkably effective for over a century, generating enormous wealth while requiring minimal administrative overhead. The religious policy of the Golden Horde demonstrated the pragmatic flexibility that characterized successful imperial systems. Initially shamanistic, the Horde gradually converted to Islam under Khan Uzbek in the 1260s, reaching full Islamization under Uzbek in the early 14th century. However, this conversion was implemented in ways that avoided alienating the Horde's predominantly Christian subjects. Orthodox Christianity remained the dominant religion in the Russian principalities, while Islamic institutions flourished in the steppe regions. The capital city of Sarai became one of the great urban centers of medieval Eurasia. Contemporary accounts describe a cosmopolitan metropolis where dozens of languages could be heard in the markets, where architectural styles from China blended with Islamic and Byzantine influences, and where scholars from across the known world gathered to study astronomy, mathematics, and theology. The city's workshops produced some of the finest weapons, jewelry, and textiles available anywhere in the medieval world. The diplomatic reach of the Golden Horde extended far beyond its immediate borders. Horde ambassadors maintained regular contact with the Mamluk Sultanate in Egypt, the Byzantine Empire, and various European kingdoms. These diplomatic relationships served multiple purposes, gathering intelligence about potential threats, coordinating military actions against common enemies, and facilitating the complex trade networks that generated much of the Horde's wealth. The legal system developed by the Golden Horde represented another significant innovation in medieval governance. The Yasa, the traditional Mongol law code, was adapted to accommodate the diverse legal traditions of conquered peoples. Islamic law governed Muslim populations, while customary law remained in effect for Christians and other religious groups. This pluralistic approach helped maintain stability while allowing for cultural diversity within the empire. The military culture that developed within the Golden Horde emphasized both individual martial excellence and collective discipline. Young warriors underwent rigorous training in archery, horsemanship, and close combat, while also learning the complex tactical formations that made Horde armies so effective. The meritocratic traditions inherited from Genghis Khan ensured that ability rather than birth determined advancement, creating an officer corps of exceptional competence. The intelligence networks maintained by the Golden Horde rivaled those of any contemporary state. Merchants, diplomats, and religious figures provided information about developments throughout Eastern Europe and beyond, while an extensive spy network monitored potential threats and opportunities. This intelligence advantage allowed horde leaders to anticipate problems and respond with remarkable speed and effectiveness. The technological innovations developed within the Golden Horde reflected the empire's position at the crossroads of Eurasian trade networks. Horde craftsmen combined Chinese metallurgical techniques with Islamic decorative traditions and European armor designs to create some of the most advanced military equipment available in the medieval world. Horde siege engines incorporated innovations from multiple traditions, while their naval capabilities, though limited, allowed for operations across the Black Sea and Caspian Sea. The administrative efficiency that characterized Golden Horde governance depended on a sophisticated bureaucracy that managed complex logistical challenges across vast distances. The postal system, adapted from Chinese and Persian models, enabled rapid communication across the empire, while standardized weights, measures, and currencies facilitated trade and taxation. Record-keeping systems tracked tribute obligations, military service requirements, and demographic changes with remarkable precision. The Golden Horde at its zenith represented one of the most successful examples of nomadic empire building in world history. Its combination of military excellence, administrative sophistication, and economic pragmatism created a political system that endured for over a century while adapting to dramatic changes in the broader Eurasian political landscape. However, this very success contained the seeds of future vulnerability. The Horde's wealth and power depended on maintaining control over vast territories inhabited by peoples who retained their own cultural identities and political aspirations. The tribute system that generated enormous revenues also created potential centers of resistance, while the military excellence that ensured Horde dominance required constant attention to training, equipment, and morale. By the 1340s, subtle signs of stress were beginning to appear within the Horde's imperial structure. The death of Khan Uzbek in 1341 initiated a succession crisis that revealed underlying tensions between different factions within the Mongol elite. More ominously, some tributary peoples were beginning to question whether continued submission to the Horde served their interests, while new external threats were emerging along the empire's borders. The stage was set for a series of challenges that would test whether the Golden Horde's imperial system could adapt to changing circumstances or whether its apparent invincibility concealed fundamental weaknesses. Chapter 1. The Golden Horde at its zenith. Sarai, capital of the Golden Horde, 1340. The morning sun glints off the golden dome of the great. Chapter 2. The Lithuanian emergence deep in the Baltic forests, 1340. A young warrior named Algirdas crouches silently in the undergrowth, watching a column of Teutonic knights lumber through the narrow forest path. The heavily armored German crusaders, sweat dripping inside their helms, search desperately for the Lithuanian raiders who have been harassing their supply trains for weeks. Algirdas signals with a barely audible bird call. Around the forest path, dozens of Lithuanian warriors, invisible in their earth-colored clothes, prepare for the ambush they have executed hundreds of times before. These are not the heavy cavalry of Western Europe or the horse archers of the steppe. These are something else entirely. Forest fighters who have learned to use their homeland's terrain as a weapon. The trap springs with deadly precision. Crossbow bolts hiss from the trees, while Lithuanian spearmen emerge from concealment to strike the knights' flanks. Within minutes, the supposedly invincible crusader column has been destroyed by enemies who seem to materialize from the forest itself. The Germans learn slowly. Algirdas murmurs to his brother Kęstutis as they survey the battlefield. They still believe that heavy armor and mounted charges can conquer anything. They have never faced an enemy who refuses to fight by their rules. What these German knights do not understand is that they have just encountered the secret weapon that will soon destroy the Golden Horde itself. The Grand Duchy of Lithuania that emerged in the 13th and 14th centuries represented one of the most remarkable political transformations in medieval European history. From a collection of Baltic tribal confederations struggling to survive between Germanic crusaders and Mongol invaders, Lithuania evolved into the largest state in medieval Europe, stretching from the Baltic Sea to the Black Sea steppes. The origins of Lithuanian military power lay in the unique geographical and cultural circumstances that shaped their development. Unlike the open steppes that favored cavalry warfare or the agricultural plains that supported heavy infantry formations, the Baltic region was dominated by vast forests, marshlands, and river systems that demanded entirely different military approaches. Lithuanian warriors adapted to this environment by developing tactical systems that emphasized stealth, mobility, and terrain exploitation. The traditional Lithuanian military structure differed fundamentally from both Western European feudalism and Eastern nomadic traditions. Lithuanian society was organized around kinship groups and territorial communities that could rapidly mobilize for defense, while maintaining the flexibility to conduct extended offensive operations. All able-bodied men received military training from childhood, creating a population that could serve as either professional warriors or militia forces depending on circumstances. The weapons and tactics developed by Lithuanian forces reflected their forest environment and the diverse enemies they faced. Lithuanian warriors typically fought on foot, using long spears, crossbows, and axes adapted for close combat in wooded terrain. They also developed sophisticated archery techniques, though their composite bows were designed for forest warfare rather than the long-range engagements favored by steppe nomads. The rise of Mindaugas in the early 13th century marked the beginning of Lithuanian state formation. Facing pressure from both Teutonic crusaders advancing from the west and Mongol forces approaching from the east, Mindaugas unified the Lithuanian tribes under a single authority and established institutional foundations that would enable future expansion. His coronation as King of Lithuania in 1253 represented international recognition of Lithuanian statehood, though the kingdom's survival required constant military innovation. The military challenges facing early Lithuanian rulers forced the development of tactical approaches that would prove decisive in later conflicts. Unlike Western European armies that relied primarily on heavy cavalry charges or Eastern armies that emphasized rapid maneuver, Lithuanian forces learned to combine different tactical elements in complex operations. Their ability to coordinate infantry, archery, and cavalry units in difficult terrain gave them significant advantages over enemies accustomed to more conventional warfare. The expansion of Lithuanian power under Gediminas 1316 to 1341 demonstrated the effectiveness of their military innovations on a larger scale. Gediminas' armies conquered vast territories in what is now Belarus and Ukraine, often defeating forces that significantly outnumbered them. These victories were achieved through tactical flexibility rather than technological superiority. Lithuanian commanders consistently found ways to fight battles on terms that favored their strengths while neutralizing enemy advantages. The political structure that developed within the expanding Lithuanian state reflected the military requirements of governing diverse territories while maintaining defensive capabilities. Unlike centralized kingdoms that concentrated power in royal capitals, Lithuania developed a federal system that allowed local rulers to maintain significant autonomy while contributing to common defense efforts. This approach proved particularly effective for integrating conquered Slavic territories, whose populations shared Orthodox Christian traditions. The intelligence and reconnaissance systems developed by Lithuanian forces represented another crucial innovation. Operating in heavily forested terrain against multiple enemies required exceptional information gathering capabilities. Lithuanian scouts developed techniques for long-range reconnaissance that allowed commanders to track enemy movements across vast distances while concealing their own forces' locations and intentions. The logistics systems that supported Lithuanian military operations also differed significantly from contemporary European models. Rather than depending on elaborate supply trains that were vulnerable to attack, Lithuanian armies learned to live off the land while maintaining combat effectiveness over extended periods. This capability proved essential for the deep penetration rates that characterized Lithuanian expansion into Mongol-controlled territories. The diplomatic strategies employed by Lithuanian rulers complemented their military innovations. Facing enemies on multiple fronts, Lithuania developed sophisticated alliance systems that often pitted their various enemies against each other. The ability to negotiate temporary agreements with some opponents while maintaining pressure on others allowed Lithuania to avoid the kind of overwhelming coalitions that had destroyed other emerging states. The cultural adaptability that characterized Lithuanian expansion also provided military advantages. Unlike conquest states that impose uniform administrative systems, Lithuania generally allowed conquered peoples to maintain their traditional institutions while requiring only military service and tribute. This approach reduced resistance while providing access to local military traditions and knowledge. The religious policies developed by Lithuanian rulers reflected both pragmatic politics and military necessity. While maintaining their traditional pagan beliefs, Lithuanian leaders generally tolerated Christianity among their subjects and even formed alliances with Orthodox Russian principalities against common enemies. This religious flexibility enabled political combinations that would have been impossible for more doctrinally rigid states. The training systems that produced Lithuanian military leaders represented another significant innovation. Rather than depending on hereditary nobility or foreign mercenaries, Lithuania developed mechanisms for identifying and promoting military talent regardless of social origin. This meritocratic approach ensured that command positions were filled by individuals with demonstrated competence rather than aristocratic connections. The technological adaptation that characterized Lithuanian military development involved selectively adopting innovations from various enemies while maintaining tactical approaches suited to local conditions. Lithuanian craftsmen learned to produce armor and weapons comparable to those used by Teutonic knights while developing specialized equipment for forest warfare. Similarly, they adopted cavalry techniques from steppe nomads while adapting them for use in wooded terrain. By the 1340s, Lithuania had emerged as a major regional power capable of challenging both the Teutonic orders and the Golden Horde simultaneously. The military innovations developed during their struggle for survival had created tactical capabilities that proved effective against diverse enemies operating in different types of terrain. The death of Gediminas in 1341 brought to power his sons Algirdas and Kęstutis, who would divide Lithuania's military responsibilities while maintaining a unified strategic direction. Kęstutis would focus primarily on the continuing struggle against the Teutonic orders, while Algirdas would lead Lithuania's expansion into territories controlled by the Golden Horde. This division of labor proved crucial for Lithuania's continued success. Rather than diluting their military capabilities by attempting to fight on all fronts simultaneously, the brothers coordinated their efforts to maximize pressure on their enemies while minimizing risks to Lithuanian territory. The strategic flexibility this arrangement provided would prove essential during the critical campaigns of the 1350s and 1360s. As the Golden Horde entered a period of increasing political instability following the death of Khan Uzbek, Algirdas began planning the campaigns that would culminate in the Battle of Blue Waters and the destruction of Mongol power in Eastern Europe. Chapter 3. The Great Crisis Sarai, 1359. The once magnificent capital of the Golden Horde lies partially in ruins, its markets empty, its palaces abandoned. In the throne room, where Khan Uzbek once held court over representatives from across Eurasia, a different scene unfolds. 3 different claimants to the throne argue violently over who has the right to rule, while their armed supporters eye each other suspiciously. "I am the rightful heir of Uzbek Khan," shouts one pretender, his hand on his sword hilt. "The Kurultai proclaimed me." "You are nothing but a usurper," screams another. "I command the loyalty of the true Mongol nobles." The third claimant says nothing, but his followers, a mix of Mongol warriors and Turkic mercenaries, prepare for violence. Outside, different parts of the city are controlled by different factions, each claiming legitimacy, each demanding tribute from terrified merchants and craftsmen. This is no longer the unified empire that once made Moscow's princes crawl on their knees. This is a fragment of that empire, tearing itself apart in an orgy of succession disputes and civil war. And in the forests of Lithuania, Grand Duke Algirdas watches these developments with growing interest, recognizing that the moment he has been preparing for has finally arrived. The seemingly invincible Golden Horde is destroying itself, and Lithuania is ready to profit from its collapse. The crisis that engulfed the Golden Horde after 1359 represented the culmination of structural problems that had been developing within the empire for decades. While the reign of Khan Uzbek, 1312 to 1341, had represented the height of Horde power and prosperity, his success had paradoxically created conditions that would lead to the empire's eventual collapse. The succession crisis that erupted following the death of Berdi Beg Khan in 1359 reflected deeper problems within the Mongol political system. The traditional succession practices inherited from Genghis Khan's era had been designed for a relatively small tribal confederation, not for governing a vast multi-ethnic empire. The Kurultai system, which theoretically gave all male descendants of the founding dynasty equal claims to leadership, proved increasingly dysfunctional as the Mongol ruling class expanded and diversified. The immediate trigger for the crisis was a dispute over succession rights between different branches of Beta Khan's descendants. Unlike earlier succession disputes, which had been resolved relatively quickly through combinations of political maneuvering and limited warfare, the crisis of 1359 unleashed forces that proved impossible to control. Multiple claimants emerged simultaneously, each with plausible legal arguments and significant military backing. The fragmentation of the Golden Horde into competing Ulus, tribal districts, accelerated rapidly after 1359. Different regions of the empire began operating independently, with local commanders assuming authority that had previously been reserved for the Khan. The Crimean Peninsula developed its own power structure, while territories along the Volga River came under the control of rival factions. This fragmentation made coordinated military responses to external threats increasingly difficult. The economic consequences of political fragmentation proved devastating for the Horde's financial stability. The tribute system that had generated enormous wealth required centralized authority to function effectively. As different factions fought for control of tribute-paying territories, the regular flow of silver, furs, and other valuable commodities that had sustained the empire began to break down. Trade networks that had operated smoothly for over a century found themselves disrupted by warfare and political uncertainty. The military implications of the succession crisis were equally severe. The Golden Horde's military effectiveness had always depended on the ability to concentrate large forces rapidly in response to threats. The decimal system of military organization required clear command hierarchies and unified strategic direction. As different factions competed for control, military units found themselves divided between competing loyalties, making effective coordinated action increasingly impossible. The social tensions that had been building within the Golden Horde for decades became impossible to contain during the succession crisis. The Mongol elite, which had originally conquered the region through superior military organization, had gradually become a wealthy aristocracy whose lifestyle bore little resemblance to their nomadic ancestors. Meanwhile, the Turkic tribal groups that provided much of the empire's military manpower had developed their own political ambitions and grievances against Mongol domination. The religious dimensions of the crisis also proved significant. The Islamic conversion of the Mongol elite under Uzbek Khan had created new sources of legitimacy and authority, but it had also generated tensions with traditionalist factions that preferred older Mongol customs. Different claimants appealed to different religious constituencies, further fracturing the empire's political unity. The demographic changes that had occurred within the Golden Horde during its century of expansion created additional sources of instability. The original Mongol conquerors had always been a small minority within their empire, and by the 14th century, they had been overwhelmed demographically by the Turkic and Slavic populations they ruled. This demographic reality made it increasingly difficult to maintain traditional Mongol political institutions and military practices. The external pressures facing the Golden Horde multiplied dramatically during the succession crisis. The growing power of the Grand Duchy of Moscow represented an obvious threat to Mongol authority over the Russian principalities, while Lithuania's expansion into territories previously controlled by the Horde challenged traditional boundaries. Simultaneously, other nomadic groups from Central Asia began testing the Horde's defenses along its eastern frontiers. The technological and tactical changes that had occurred in medieval warfare during the 14th century also posed challenges for the Golden Horde's military system. The heavy cavalry that had made Mongol armies invincible in the 13th century proved less effective against the improved infantry formations and crossbow units that had become common in European warfare. The Horde's failure to adapt its tactical systems to these changes left it vulnerable to enemies who had learned to counter traditional Mongol advantages. The information systems that had previously given the Golden Horde significant intelligence advantages began to break down during the succession crisis. The diplomatic and commercial networks that had provided early warning of external threats became unreliable as different factions pursued independent foreign policies. The loss of this intelligence advantage made it increasingly difficult to anticipate and counter external threats. The administrative collapse that accompanied political fragmentation had cascading effects throughout the empire. The sophisticated bureaucracy that had managed complex logistical challenges across vast distances required stable political authority to function effectively. As central control weakened, local administrators began operating independently, further accelerating the empire's disintegration. The psychological impact of the succession crisis proved as significant as its material consequences. For over a century, the Golden Horde's power had seemed divinely ordained and practically invincible. The spectacle of Mongol warriors fighting each other while external enemies pressed against the empire's borders shattered the mystique of invincibility that had been crucial for maintaining control over subject populations. The Great Crisis that began in 1359 marked the beginning of the end for the Golden Horde as a unified imperial power. While various factions would continue to claim the title of Khan and exercise authority over portions of the former empire, the political unity that had made the Horde a major force in Eurasian politics was permanently shattered. For external observers, particularly those who had been subject to Mongol authority, the crisis represented an unprecedented opportunity. The Lithuanian leadership, under Grand Duke Algirdas, recognized that the moment had arrived to challenge Mongol control over territories that had been under Horde authority for over a century. The military campaigns that Algirdas began planning in the early 1360s were designed to exploit the Golden Horde's temporary weakness while establishing Lithuanian control over strategically crucial territories. Rather than merely conducting raids for plunder, these campaigns aimed at permanent territorial conquest that would fundamentally alter the balance of power in Eastern Europe. The stage was set for a confrontation that would determine whether the Golden Horde could recover from its internal crisis or whether its weakness would prove permanent. The Battle of Blue Waters would provide the answer to that question. Chapter 4. Algirdas's Grand Strategy. Vilnius, Autumn 1361. In the wooden castle that serves as the capital of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, Algirdas stands before a map unlike any seen in Western Europe. Drawn on leather and marked with charcoal, it shows not the neat boundaries of kingdoms and duchies, but the fluid realities of Eastern European power areas of strong control, disputed territories, and the vast regions where Mongol authority is weakening. "Brother," says Kęstutis, studying the map carefully, "the Teutonic knights grow stronger each year. Their stone castles multiply like mushrooms after rain, and their armies carry new weapons from the German lands." Algirdas nods, tracing his finger along the western borders, where Lithuanian forces have been locked in seemingly endless conflict with the Crusader orders. "Yes, but look here," he says, pointing eastward toward the territories marked with Mongol symbols. "While we exhaust ourselves fighting Germans in the west, the real opportunity lies in the east. The Golden Horde tears itself apart with civil war. Their princes fight each other instead of defending their borders. You propose to fight the inheritors of Genghis Khan?" Kęstutis asks skeptically. "I propose to destroy them," Algirdas replies quietly. "The Mongols conquered through unity and speed. They have lost both. The time has come to teach the world that the age of the horse lords is ending." Algirdas' strategic vision for Lithuania's expansion represented one of the most ambitious military and political plans of the medieval period. Unlike the opportunistic raiding that characterized much medieval warfare, Algirdas developed a comprehensive strategy designed to fundamentally alter the balance of power in Eastern Europe, while positioning Lithuania as a major imperial power. The geopolitical analysis underlying Algirdas's strategy demonstrated sophisticated understanding of the changing dynamics in 14th century Eastern Europe. The Grand Duke recognized that Lithuania faced a strategic dilemma that could only be resolved through dramatic expansion or inevitable decline. Caught between the expanding power of the Teutonic orders in the west and the traditional dominance of the Golden Horde in the east, Lithuania could not survive indefinitely as a medium-sized forest kingdom. The timing of Algirdas's eastern expansion reflected careful observation of the Golden Horde's internal crisis. Rather than attempting to challenge Mongol power during its peak under Uzbek Khan, Algirdas waited for the succession disputes that began in 1359 to weaken Horde unity. His intelligence networks, developed through decades of conflict with multiple enemies, provided detailed information about the fragmenting command structure and competing loyalties within the Mongol Empire. The military preparations for Algirdas's eastern campaigns involved fundamental reforms of Lithuanian military organization. Traditional Lithuanian forces, optimized for forest warfare against the Teutonic orders, required adaptation for operations in the open steppes where Mongol cavalry maintained advantages. Algirdas invested heavily in expanding Lithuanian cavalry capabilities while developing combined arms tactics that could neutralize traditional Mongol advantages. The diplomatic groundwork for the eastern expansion proved as crucial as military preparations. Algirdas cultivated relationships with Orthodox Russian principalities that had grown restive under Mongol rule, positioning Lithuania as a potential liberator rather than simply another conqueror. These diplomatic initiatives provided local support and intelligence while creating divisions within territories traditionally loyal to the Golden Horde. The economic calculations underlying Algirdas's strategy reflected Lithuania's growing resource requirements. The long struggle against the Teutonic orders had strained Lithuanian finances, while demonstrating that defensive strategies alone could not ensure survival. The tribute-paying territories of the Golden Horde offered opportunities for wealth that could finance both continued resistance to the German orders and further expansion. The religious dimensions of Algirdas's strategy proved particularly sophisticated. While maintaining Lithuania's traditional pagan identity to preserve independence from both Catholic and Orthodox authorities, Algirdas presented his campaigns as liberation efforts for Orthodox Christians suffering under Muslim Mongol rule. This religious framing helped legitimize Lithuanian expansion while attracting support from potential subjects. The first phase of Algirdas' Eastern strategy focused on consolidating Lithuanian control over territories with mixed or disputed loyalties. The capture of Bryansk around 1357 to 1358 demonstrated Lithuanian capability to seize territories directly from Mongol control while testing horde responses. The success of this operation, achieved with minimal resistance, confirmed Algirdas' assessment that Mongol power was indeed declining. The intelligence operations that supported Algirdas' strategic planning involved systematic gathering of information about Mongol military capabilities, political divisions, and economic resources. Lithuanian agents, often disguised as merchants or pilgrims, traveled throughout horde territories mapping defensive positions, assessing local loyalties, and identifying potential allies. This intelligence advantage proved crucial for subsequent military operations. The tactical innovations developed for the Eastern campaigns reflected Lithuania's need to operate effectively in steppe environments while maintaining their traditional strengths. Lithuanian forces learned to construct field fortifications rapidly, providing defensive positions that could neutralize Mongol mobility advantages. They also developed new cavalry formations that combine heavy and light cavalry in ways that maximize shock effect while maintaining flexibility. The logistical systems created to support extended operations in hostile territory represented another crucial innovation. Unlike previous Lithuanian campaigns, which had operated from secure forest bases, the Eastern expansion required self-sustaining forces capable of operating independently for extended periods. Lithuanian commanders developed supply systems that combined foraging, local procurement, and pre-positioned depots. The command structure that Algirdas established for the Eastern campaigns reflected lessons learned from decades of multi-front warfare. Rather than attempting to exercise direct control over all operations, Algirdas created a system of delegated authority that allowed subordinate commanders to respond rapidly to local conditions while maintaining strategic coordination. This command philosophy proved essential for the complex operations required to defeat Mongol forces. The propaganda efforts that accompanied Algirdas' Eastern expansion were designed to shape both international opinion and local attitudes within target territories. Lithuanian diplomats presented the campaigns as efforts to restore legitimate Orthodox Christian authority over territories that had been unlawfully occupied by Muslim nomads. This messaging proved particularly effective in gaining support from European powers concerned about Islamic expansion. The timing of specific military operations reflected careful coordination with weather patterns, agricultural cycles, and Mongol political developments. Algirdas typically launched major campaigns during periods when internal horde conflicts prevented unified responses, while avoiding seasons when steppe mobility advantages were maximized. This strategic timing often allowed Lithuanian forces to achieve objectives before effective resistance could be organized. The territorial objectives identified by Algirdas focused on areas that would provide maximum strategic advantage while being defensible with available resources. The principalities of Kiev, Chernigov, and Pereyaslav represented crucial objectives because they controlled major river routes and agricultural regions while serving as gateways to further expansion. Control of these areas would position Lithuania to dominate trade between northern and southern Europe. Algirdas' grand strategy represented a fundamental shift in Lithuanian thinking from survival to imperial expansion. Rather than merely defending forest territories against external threats, Lithuania committed to becoming a major European power capable of challenging the traditional dominance of both Germanic and Mongol empires. The success of the early phases of this strategy, particularly the capture of Bryansk and other preliminary objectives, demonstrated that Mongol power was indeed vulnerable to sustained pressure. These initial victories encouraged further expansion while providing resources and experience that would prove crucial for larger operations. By 1362, Algirdas had completed his preparations for the decisive phase of his eastern strategy. The military reforms were complete, the diplomatic groundwork had been laid, and intelligence indicated that the Golden Horde remained paralyzed by internal conflicts. The moment had arrived for the campaign that would either establish Lithuania as a major imperial power or result in catastrophic defeat. The Battle of Blue Waters would determine whether Algirdas' vision of Lithuanian expansion was realistic or merely the fantasy of an ambitious ruler. The Grand Duke had spent years preparing for this moment, and everything depended on whether his forest warriors could defeat the heirs of Genghis Khan in open battle. Chapter 5. The Mongol Weakness. The Steppe Camp of Kutlubuka. Autumn 1362. 3 Mongol commanders, the local Beks, who controlled territories in what is now southern Ukraine, huddle around a dying fire as their scouts bring increasingly disturbing reports. Lithuanian armies are moving south from Kiev, but these aren't the hit-and-run raids the Mongols have grown accustomed to. This is something different. A coordinated invasion by a unified force. How many warriors did the Lithuanians bring? Asked Dmitry, the eldest of the 3 commanders. Our scouts count at least 15,000, replies the messenger, his voice betraying uncertainty. But they move in formations we have not seen before. Their cavalry fights alongside their infantry in ways that confuse our observers. The 3 commanders exchanged glances. Between them, they can muster perhaps 12,000 warriors, still a formidable force by any measure. But their armies have been weakened by years of civil war. Their best weapons sold to finance political struggles. Their most experienced leaders killed in the endless succession disputes that have torn the Golden Horde apart. We should send for reinforcements from Sarai, suggests one commander. The others laugh bitterly. From which Sarai? Asked Dmitry. There are 3 different Khans claiming authority, and none of them control enough territory to help us. For the first time in their lives, these heirs of Genghis Khan face an enemy they might not be able to defeat. The military weaknesses that plagued the Golden Horde by the 1360s represented the culmination of systemic problems that had been developing for decades. While the empire retained impressive theoretical capabilities, the practical reality was that years of civil war and political fragmentation had fundamentally undermined the organizational structures that had once made Mongol armies invincible. The command structure that had been crucial to earlier Mongol successes had become hopelessly compromised by competing loyalties and uncertain authority. The traditional decimal system of military organization required clear hierarchies and unified strategic direction, but the succession crisis had created multiple competing chains of command. Local commanders often found themselves receiving contradictory orders from different claimants to the throne, making coordinated military responses impossible. The quality of Mongol forces had declined dramatically from the professional standards maintained during the empire's peak. The original Mongol warriors who had conquered Eastern Europe had been career soldiers whose entire lives revolved around military service. By the 1360s, many Mongol warriors were essentially armed civilians whose primary occupations involved trade, agriculture, or crafts rather than warfare. The intensive training regiments that had once produced the world's finest cavalry had largely disappeared. The economic foundation of Mongol military power had been severely eroded by decades of political instability. The tribute system that had once generated enormous wealth now functioned sporadically due to competing claims and reduced central authority. Military equipment that had once been maintained to the highest standards was often inadequate due to financial constraints, while the sophisticated logistics systems that had supported earlier campaigns could no longer be properly funded. The technological advantages that had once distinguished Mongol forces had been largely eliminated by the military innovations of their enemies. The composite bows that had given Mongol horse archers devastating firepower were no longer significantly superior to the crossbows used by European infantry, while improvements in armor design had reduced the effectiveness of traditional Mongol tactics. Meanwhile, the Mongols had failed to adopt countermeasures against the new tactical approaches developed by their opponents. The intelligence systems that had provided earlier Mongol commanders with crucial advantages had broken down almost completely. The commercial and diplomatic networks that had once supplied detailed information about enemy movements and intentions could no longer be maintained effectively due to political chaos. Local commanders often found themselves operating blindly, without accurate knowledge of enemy capabilities or intentions. The psychological factors that had once made Mongol armies nearly invincible had been reversed by years of visible weakness and defeat. The aura of invincibility that had often caused enemies to surrender without fighting had been shattered by repeated demonstrations of Mongol vulnerability. Instead of enemies fleeing at the sight of Mongol banners, potential opponents now saw Mongol forces as attractive targets for profitable attacks. The logistical capabilities that had once allowed Mongol armies to operate across vast distances had been severely compromised. The sophisticated supply systems that had supported earlier campaigns required stable political authority and substantial financial resources. By the 1360s, local Mongol commanders often lacked the resources to maintain their forces properly, let alone support extended military operations. The tactical flexibility that had been a hallmark of Mongol military excellence had been reduced by the loss of experienced officers and the breakdown of training systems. Traditional Mongol tactics required complex coordination between different types of units and rapid adaptation to changing battlefield conditions. The inexperienced leaders who had replaced veteran commanders often lacked the knowledge and authority necessary for effective tactical innovation. The alliance systems that had once provided the Golden Horde with additional military resources had largely collapsed due to the succession crisis. Tributary peoples who had once provided auxiliary forces now pursued independent policies or aligned themselves with alternative power centers. The network of alliances that had once multiplied Mongol military capabilities had been replaced by a collection of potential enemies. The recruitment systems that had once ensured steady supplies of high-quality warriors had been disrupted by demographic changes and political fragmentation. The nomadic lifestyle that had produced generations of skilled horsemen had been gradually abandoned by many Mongol families who had adopted sedentary lifestyles. Meanwhile, the political chaos had made it difficult to implement consistent recruitment policies across different regions. The equipment standards that had once distinguished Mongol forces had declined due to economic constraints and the breakdown of manufacturing systems. The sophisticated armor and weapons that had been standard equipment for elite Mongol units were often unavailable or of inferior quality. Local commanders frequently found themselves leading forces that were inadequately equipped for serious military operations. The morale problems that had developed within Mongol forces reflected broader concerns about the empire's future. Warriors who had once fought with confidence in ultimate victory now questioned whether their cause was worth the risks involved. The uncertainty about legitimate authority made it difficult for commanders to inspire the kind of dedication that had characterized earlier Mongol armies. The strategic coordination that had once allowed the Golden Horde to concentrate overwhelming force at crucial points had become impossible due to political fragmentation. Different Mongol factions pursued independent military policies that often conflicted with each other, while communication systems that had once enabled rapid coordination across vast distances had broken down almost completely. The systematic weaknesses that plagued Mongol forces by 1362 represented a complete reversal of the advantages that had made the Golden Horde a dominant power in Eastern Europe. Where once Mongol armies had possessed superior organization, training, equipment, and leadership, they now found themselves at disadvantages in all these areas when facing determined opponents. The three Mongol commanders who faced Algirdas' invasion represented the best forces that the fragmenting Golden Horde could assemble in the threatened region. Their combined armies included many experienced warriors and retained some of the traditional Mongol capabilities, but they operated under severe handicaps that would prove decisive in the coming battle. The political isolation of these commanders, cut off from effective support by the ongoing succession crisis, meant that they would have to face the Lithuanian invasion with only their local resources. The failure of the broader Mongol political system to provide coordinated resistance would transform what might have been a manageable local conflict into a decisive test of whether Mongol power could survive at all. As Algirdas' armies approached the banks of the Syniukha River, they faced enemies who still commanded respect but no longer possessed the overwhelming advantages that had once made Mongol victory inevitable. Chapter 6. The Lithuanian Secret Weapon, a forest clearing near Vilnius, spring 1362. Algirdas watches as his nephew, one of Karahatas' sons, demonstrates the tactical innovation that will soon change the course of Eastern European history. Before them, a mixed unit of Lithuanian warriors executes a complex maneuver that would have been impossible just a generation earlier. Lithuanian infantry, armed with long spears and crossbows, form a defensive semicircle. Behind them, light cavalry provides mobile support, while heavier cavalry waits in reserve. But this isn't the traditional separation of foot and horse that characterizes most medieval armies. Instead, the different elements work together in ways that maximize their combined effectiveness while minimizing individual weaknesses. Watch carefully, Algirdas tells his assembled commanders. The crossbowmen strike first, disrupting enemy formations. The spearmen hold the line while our cavalry attacks from the flanks. But see how quickly they can reform infantry becoming cavalry support, cavalry dismounting to fight as infantry when terrain demands it. The demonstration concludes with a simulated pursuit, as all elements of the formation coordinate to exploit a breakthrough. This is how we will defeat the Mongols, Algirdas declares. Not by trying to be better horsemen, they will always excel at steppe warfare, but by forcing them to fight our kind of battle, where their advantages become weaknesses. The military innovations that enabled Lithuania's victory over the Golden Horde represented the culmination of decades of tactical development, driven by the unique challenges of fighting multiple enemies simultaneously. Unlike armies that specialized in particular types of warfare, Lithuanian forces had been forced to develop tactical systems capable of defeating heavy cavalry, light cavalry, infantry formations, and siege specialists depending on the specific enemy and terrain. The foundation of Lithuanian tactical superiority lay in their revolutionary approach to combined arms warfare. While most medieval armies treated different types of units as separate entities that operated independently, Lithuanian commanders developed systems that integrated infantry, archery, and cavalry into unified formations. This integration allowed Lithuanian forces to concentrate maximum combat power while maintaining the flexibility to adapt to changing battlefield conditions. The crossbow tactics developed by Lithuanian forces represented a crucial component of their combined arms approach. Unlike the English longbow, which required years of training to master, crossbows could be effectively used by warriors with relatively brief training periods. Lithuanian crossbowmen learned to operate in close coordination with spear-armed infantry, providing covering fire during advances and concentrated firepower during defensive actions. The spear formations that anchored Lithuanian battle lines differed significantly from contemporary European pike squares or traditional infantry formations. Lithuanian spearmen were trained to fight both in close formation against cavalry charges and in open order during pursuit or retreat operations. This tactical flexibility allowed them to maintain effectiveness across different phases of battle while supporting other elements of their combined arms teams. The cavalry innovations developed by Lithuanian forces reflected their need to operate effectively in both forest and open terrain. Unlike Western European heavy cavalry, which relied primarily on the shock effect of mounted charges, Lithuanian cavalry learned to coordinate with infantry units in complex tactical maneuvers. Lithuanian horsemen could fight effectively as mounted archers, heavy cavalry, or dismounted infantry, depending on tactical requirements. The command systems that enabled these complex tactical innovations relied on extensive training and clear communication procedures. Lithuanian commanders developed standardized signals and formations that allowed rapid tactical adjustments during combat. Unlike armies that depended on heroic individual leadership, Lithuanian forces operated through disciplined teamwork that could function effectively even when senior leaders were killed or wounded. The intelligence and reconnaissance capabilities that supported Lithuanian tactical excellence reflected their forest origins and multi-front war requirements. Lithuanian scouts were trained to operate in all types of terrain while gathering detailed information about enemy movements, capabilities, and intentions. This intelligence advantage often allowed Lithuanian commanders to choose the timing and location of battles while denying similar advantages to their enemies. The logistics innovations that enabled sustained Lithuanian military operations differed significantly from traditional European supply systems. Rather than depending on elaborate baggage trains that reduced mobility and created vulnerabilities, Lithuanian forces learned to operate with minimal equipment while living off local resources. This logistical flexibility proved crucial for the deep penetration campaigns required to challenge Mongol authority. The training systems that produced these tactical capabilities involved comprehensive preparation that began in childhood and continued throughout a warrior's career. Unlike feudal systems that produced individual fighters, Lithuanian military culture emphasized unit cohesion and tactical coordination. Warriors learned to function as team members rather than individual heroes, creating the discipline necessary for complex combined arms operations. The psychological preparation that characterized Lithuanian military culture proved as important as tactical training. Lithuanian warriors were taught that their tactical systems were superior to those of their enemies, and that disciplined execution of established procedures would produce victory regardless of enemy numbers or reputation. This confidence proved crucial when facing enemies with fearsome reputations like the Mongol cavalry. The weapon systems developed by Lithuanian forces reflected their combined arms approach and operational requirements. Lithuanian equipment was designed for versatility rather than specialization, allowing individual warriors to function effectively in multiple roles. This equipment philosophy supported the tactical flexibility that distinguished Lithuanian forces from their more specialized enemies. The terrain adaptation techniques that Lithuanian forces had mastered through generations of forest warfare proved surprisingly effective in steppe environments. The ability to use natural features for tactical advantage, construct field fortifications rapidly, and coordinate movement across difficult terrain gave Lithuanian forces capabilities that Mongol commanders had rarely encountered. The communication systems that enabled battlefield coordination relied on combinations of visual, auditory, and messenger networks that had been refined through decades of complex operations. Lithuanian commanders could coordinate actions across extended battle lines while maintaining the flexibility to respond to unexpected developments. This communication superiority often proved decisive during fluid combat situations. The morale factors that distinguished Lithuanian forces reflected their confidence in their tactical systems and their motivation for the campaign. Unlike mercenary forces fighting for pay or feudal levies serving reluctant obligations, Lithuanian warriors were convinced that they were participating in a historic opportunity to fundamentally alter the balance of power in Eastern Europe. The adaptation procedures that allowed Lithuanian tactical systems to function in steppe environments involved modifications of forest warfare techniques for open terrain conditions. Lithuanian commanders learned to create artificial terrain features when natural ones were unavailable, while maintaining the coordination and flexibility that characterized their forest operations. The tactical innovations that Lithuanian forces brought to the Battle of Blue Waters represented one of the most sophisticated military systems of the medieval period. Their combined arms approach, tactical flexibility, and operational capabilities gave them decisive advantages over enemies who relied on traditional cavalry-dominated warfare. The psychological impact of these innovations proved as significant as their tactical effectiveness. For over a century, European military thinking had been dominated by assumptions about Mongol invincibility based on their superior cavalry and traditional tactics. The Lithuanian demonstration that these advantages could be neutralized through proper tactical coordination shattered long-held beliefs about military possibilities. The strategic implications of Lithuanian tactical superiority extended far beyond the immediate military situation. The ability to defeat Mongol forces in open battle would fundamentally alter the balance of power in Eastern Europe while demonstrating that nomadic cavalry armies could be overcome by properly organized opponents. As Algirdas's armies approached the confrontation at Blue Waters, they carried with them not just superior numbers or equipment, but a tactical system that had been specifically designed to defeat the type of enemy they were about to face. The secret weapon that would destroy the Golden Horde was not any single innovation, but the integrated approach to warfare that Lithuanian commanders had spent decades perfecting. Chapter 7. The March to Blue Waters. The banks of the Dnieper River, September 1362. A Lithuanian army unlike any that has ever marched through these lands makes its way across the ancient bridge at Kiev. This is not the raiding party that Mongol commanders might expect, nor the feudal host that Western European kings would recognize. This is something entirely new, a professional military force designed specifically to conquer and hold territory. At the head of the column rides Grand Duke Algirdas himself, his banner bearing the charging knight that symbolizes Lithuanian power. Behind him march 15,000 warriors organized in precise formations that can shift rapidly from column to battle line as circumstances require. Lithuanian infantry with their distinctive spears and crossbows march alongside cavalry, units whose equipment combines the best features of Eastern and Western military traditions. Local populations, Slavic farmers, who have paid tribute to the Golden Horde for over a century, watch in amazement as this disciplined force passes through their villages. For the first time in their lives, they see an army that claims to be their liberator rather than their oppressor. "Are these the warriors who will break the Mongol yoke?" asks an old farmer to his son. "Perhaps," comes the reply. "But they look different from any army I have ever seen. They move like they actually know what they're doing." The Lithuanian campaign that culminated at Blue Waters represented the largest and most ambitious military operation in the Grand Duchy's history. Unlike previous expeditions that had focused on specific territorial objectives, this campaign aimed at nothing less than the complete elimination of Mongol authority over vast regions of what is now Ukraine. The scale and complexity of the operation required unprecedented logistical planning and strategic coordination. The composition of Algirdas's army reflected the multi-ethnic character of the expanding Lithuanian state. The core consisted of ethnic Lithuanian warriors whose forest fighting traditions provided the tactical foundation for the expedition. However, significant contingents were drawn from Slavic territories that had already been incorporated into the Grand Duchy, providing local knowledge and linguistic capabilities essential for operations in Mongol-controlled regions. The organizational structure of the Lithuanian Expeditionary Force demonstrated sophisticated military thinking that had learned from both successes and failures in previous campaigns. Rather than organizing along traditional ethnic or regional lines, Algirdas created mixed units that combined different types of fighters in tactically effective formations. This approach maximized combat effectiveness while building the inter-ethnic cooperation that would be essential for governing conquered territories. The intelligence preparation for the campaign involved systematic gathering of information about Mongol military capabilities, political divisions, and territorial control. Lithuanian agents had spent months mapping defensive positions, assessing local loyalties, and identifying potential allies within the Mongol sphere of influence. This intelligence advantage provided Lithuanian commanders with detailed knowledge of enemy strengths and weaknesses. The logistical systems developed to support the deep penetration required for the campaign represented a significant innovation in medieval military operations. Unlike traditional armies that depended on supply lines extending back to home territories, Algirdas's force was designed to operate independently for extended periods while maintaining full combat effectiveness. Mobile workshops could repair weapons and equipment, while foraging systems provided food and other necessities. The route selection for the march to Blue Waters reflected careful consideration of both military and political factors. Rather than taking the most direct path, which would have involved crossing heavily defended Mongol positions, Algirdas chose an approach that maximized opportunities for local support while minimizing risks of premature confrontation. The army's passage through Kiev served both strategic and propaganda purposes. The timing of the campaign was coordinated with political developments within the Golden Horde to maximize Lithuanian advantages. Intelligence indicated that the ongoing succession crisis had prevented the concentration of significant Mongol forces in the threatened region, while local commanders remained uncertain about their authority and resource availability. This timing gave Lithuanian forces the opportunity to achieve their objectives before effective resistance could be organized. The psychological warfare component of the Lithuanian campaign proved as important as conventional military operations. Algirdas's forces were instructed to present themselves as liberators of Orthodox Christian populations from Muslim Mongol rule, while demonstrating respect for local customs and institutions. This approach helped secure local cooperation while undermining Mongol authority, even in areas not yet under direct Lithuanian control. The tactical preparations for the expected confrontation with Mongol forces involved extensive training in steppe warfare techniques that differed significantly from the forest combat for which Lithuanian forces were traditionally prepared. Lithuanian commanders studied Mongol tactical methods while developing countermeasures designed to neutralize traditional cavalry advantages. These preparations included practice in rapid deployment and tactical coordination across open terrain. The diplomatic initiatives that accompanied the military campaign were designed to isolate Mongol forces while building support for Lithuanian objectives. Algirdas's representatives contacted various Slavic principalities and Orthodox religious leaders, presenting the expedition as an effort to restore legitimate Christian authority over territories unlawfully occupied by Islamic nomads. These diplomatic efforts helped create a favorable political environment for military operations. The command structure established for the campaign reflected lessons learned from previous multi-unit operations while adapting to the specific challenges of steppe warfare. Algirdas retained overall strategic direction while delegating tactical authority to subordinate commanders with specialized knowledge of different types of operations. This command philosophy balanced centralized strategic coordination with decentralized tactical flexibility. The reconnaissance operations that preceded the main advance provided detailed information about Mongol dispositions and intentions. Lithuanian scouts, many of them drawn from Slavic populations familiar with the local terrain, mapped defensive positions while gathering intelligence about enemy morale and capabilities. This reconnaissance advantage allowed Lithuanian commanders to choose the timing and location of the decisive confrontation. The morale preparation that preceded the final advance involved intensive efforts to ensure that Lithuanian forces understood both the significance of their mission and the tactical methods that would ensure success. Algirdas and his subordinate commanders emphasized that they were participating in a historic opportunity to fundamentally alter the balance of power in Eastern Europe while avenging generations of submission to foreign rule. The final approach to the confrontation zone involved careful coordination of movement and deployment to ensure that Lithuanian forces could achieve maximum tactical advantage when battle was joined. Unlike traditional medieval armies that often stumbled into combat, Algirdas's force moved with deliberate precision designed to create the most favorable possible conditions for the coming engagement. The Lithuanian march to blue waters represented the culmination of decades of military development and strategic planning. The army that approached the Syniukha River carried with it not just superior numbers and equipment, but the accumulated tactical knowledge and institutional capabilities that had been developed through generations of multi-front warfare. The confidence that characterized Lithuanian forces as they approached the confrontation reflected their systematic preparation and their conviction that their tactical innovations would prove decisive against traditional Mongol cavalry methods. Unlike previous challenges to Mongol authority, who had often relied on hope and courage rather than systematic planning, Algirdas's forces possessed realistic expectations of victory based on careful analysis of comparative capabilities. The political and strategic implications of the approaching battle extended far beyond the immediate military situation. A Lithuanian victory would not only eliminate Mongol authority over vast territories, but would also establish Lithuania as a major European power capable of challenging traditional imperial hierarchies. Conversely, a Lithuanian defeat would likely end their expansion while demonstrating that Mongol power remained formidable despite internal difficulties. As the two armies approached their fateful confrontation on the banks of the Syniukha River, both sides understood that they were about to participate in a battle that would determine the future political structure of Eastern Europe. Chapter 9. The immediate aftermath, the battlefield of Blue Waters, sunset of the same day. Where thousands of Mongol warriors had stood that morning, carrion birds now feast on the dead. The three proud commanders who had ruled territories from the Black Sea to the Dnieper River lie among their fallen soldiers, their dreams of restoring Golden Horde glory buried forever in the Ukrainian soil. Algirdas walked slowly among the spoils of victory weapons that had once seemed invincible, armor that had protected the masters of the steppes, banners that had struck fear into the hearts of European princes for over a century. His soldiers are already at work stripping the dead of anything valuable, but the Lithuanian Grand Duke's thoughts extend far beyond immediate plunder. "Uncle," calls one of Karahodas's sons, approaching with a captured Mongol standard, "what shall we do with the territories we have won? Kiev and Podolia are ours, but they are vast lands requiring governors and garrisons." Algirdas takes the banner, a symbol of Mongol authority that will never again command obedience east of the Dnieper. "We shall make them truly Lithuanian," he says quietly, "not through conquest alone, but through integration." The Slavic peoples have waited over a century for liberation from the Mongol yoke. Now they shall see what rule by forest princes can accomplish. The transformation of Eastern Europe has begun, and it will reshape the continent forever. The immediate territorial consequences of the Battle of Blue Waters exceeded even Algirdas's most optimistic expectations. The systematic destruction of Mongol military power in the region eliminated all effective resistance to Lithuanian expansion across vast territories that had been under Golden Horde control for over a century. Within months of the battle, Lithuanian authority extended from the traditional Baltic core territories to the shores of the Black Sea, the administrative challenges created by such rapid territorial expansion required unprecedented organizational innovation. Unlike the Mongol system, which had relied primarily on tribute extraction and indirect rule, the Lithuanian administration needed to establish effective governance over culturally diverse populations while maintaining military capabilities for continued expansion. Algirdas developed a federal system that balanced central coordination with local autonomy. The integration of conquered Slavic territories into the Lithuanian political system proved remarkably successful due to careful attention to religious and cultural sensitivities. Rather than imposing Lithuanian paganism or attempting forced cultural assimilation, Algirdas's administration generally preserved existing institutions while requiring only political loyalty and military service. This approach encouraged voluntary cooperation rather than resentful submission. The economic benefits of the territorial acquisitions provided Lithuania with resources that transformed the Grand Duchy from a regional forest kingdom into a major European power. The agricultural productivity of Ukrainian territories, combined with control over crucial trade routes, generated wealth that could finance both military expansion and internal development. The tribute that had once flowed to Sarai now supported Lithuanian military and administrative operations. The strategic implications of Lithuanian control over former Mongol territories extended far beyond the immediate region. Control of Kiev provided access to the traditional center of Slavic political culture, while command of river routes enabled Lithuanian influence throughout Eastern Europe. The elimination of Mongol power also removed a major obstacle to further expansion in multiple directions. The military consequences of the victory proved as significant as the territorial gains. The destruction of experienced Mongol forces eliminated the most dangerous potential opposition to continued Lithuanian expansion, while captured equipment and horses strengthened Lithuanian military capabilities. More importantly, the demonstration of Lithuanian tactical superiority encouraged additional recruitment and allied support. The psychological impact of the victory resonated throughout Eastern Europe as news of the battle spread. Populations that had endured Mongol rule for generations suddenly realized that the seemingly invincible empire could be defeated by determined opponents using appropriate methods. This revelation encouraged resistance movements while undermining the psychological foundations of remaining Mongol authority. The diplomatic repercussions of Lithuanian victory fundamentally altered the regional balance of power. European rulers who had viewed Lithuania as a minor forest kingdom were forced to recognize the Grand Duchy as a major power capable of influencing continental politics. Simultaneously, the remaining fragments of the Golden Horde found themselves isolated and vulnerable to additional attacks. The cultural consequences of Lithuanian expansion into Orthodox Christian territories created opportunities for unprecedented cultural synthesis. Unlike previous conquest that had typically resulted in cultural domination by the conquering power, Lithuanian rule encouraged the preservation and development of local traditions while integrating them into a broader political framework. This cultural tolerance proved crucial for long-term stability. The religious policies that governed Lithuanian administration of conquered territories demonstrated remarkable sophistication for the medieval period. Algirdas's government generally supported Orthodox Christianity while maintaining Lithuania's traditional paganism, creating a religious pluralism that was rare in medieval Europe. This tolerance helped secure local support while avoiding the religious conflicts that had plagued other expansionist states. The urban development that followed Lithuanian conquest reflected the Grand Duchy's commitment to long-term territorial integration rather than simple extraction. Lithuanian administration invested in infrastructure development, trade facilitation, and institutional strengthening that enhanced the economic value of conquered territories while building local support for continued Lithuanian rule. The legal systems that emerged in Lithuanian-controlled territories represented innovative attempts to balance different legal traditions within a unified political framework. Lithuanian customary law, Slavic legal traditions, and remnants of Mongol administrative practices were combined in systems that provided effective governance while respecting cultural diversity. This legal pluralism became a model for subsequent Lithuanian expansion. The military organization that developed to defend and administer the expanded Lithuanian territories reflected lessons learned from the Blue Waters campaign. Rather than attempting to garrison vast territories with Lithuanian forces alone, Algirdas created integrated military systems that combined Lithuanian professional soldiers with local militias and allied forces. This approach maximized military effectiveness while minimizing administrative costs. The intelligence networks that supported Lithuanian control over former Mongol territories built on the reconnaissance systems that had enabled the original victory. Lithuanian administrators maintained systematic information gathering about potential threats, local loyalties, and economic opportunities throughout their expanded territories. This intelligence advantage helped prevent rebellions while identifying opportunities for further expansion. The succession arrangements that Algirdas established for governing conquered territories reflected his understanding of the long-term challenges involved in maintaining control over such vast and diverse regions. Rather than relying on direct Lithuanian rule alone, he appointed members of his extended family to govern major territories while maintaining effective central coordination through a sophisticated communication system. The immediate aftermath of the Battle of Blue Waters established Lithuania as the dominant power in Eastern Europe, while demonstrating that the age of Mongol supremacy had ended permanently. The territorial gains achieved through a single decisive battle exceeded the conquests of most medieval rulers during their entire reigns. The systematic approach that Lithuanian administration took to governing conquered territories created foundations for political stability that would endure for centuries. Rather than simply extracting resources from defeated enemies, Lithuania created institutional frameworks that encouraged long-term development while building genuine loyalty among subject populations. The strategic position that Lithuania achieved through these conquests provided the foundation for future expansion that would make the Grand Duchy the largest state in medieval Europe. Control of crucial river routes and agricultural regions gave Lithuania both the resources and the strategic advantages necessary for challenging other major powers, including the growing influence of Moscow and the continuing threat from the Teutonic orders. As word of Lithuanian victory spread throughout Europe, it became clear that the Battle of Blue Waters had created a new reality in Eastern European politics. The Forest Kingdom that had once struggled for survival against Germanic crusaders had become an imperial power capable of determining the fate of vast territories and millions of people. Chapter 10. The Golden Horde's final Salalsaleh, Winter 1363. The once magnificent capital of the Golden Horde lies half empty, its bazaars silent, its workshops abandoned. In the throne room where Khan Uzbek once received tribute from across Eastern Europe, a pretender named Murad sits on a throne that no longer commands obedience beyond the city walls. "My lord," reports a haggard messenger who has ridden hard from the west, "the Lithuanians have taken everything. Kiev, Chernigov, Pereyaslav fly the banner of the forest princes. The tribute from Ukraine has ceased entirely." Murad stares at the map that shows his shrinking domain. Red marks indicate territories lost to Lithuania, while blue marks show regions controlled by rival claimants to his own throne. The great empire that had once stretched from the Urals to the Carpathians has fragmented into a collection of petty khanates fighting over the bones of former greatness. "What of our armies?" Murad asks desperately. "Can we not gather forces to reclaim what has been stolen?" The messenger shifts uncomfortably. "My lord, the armies follow whoever can pay them. Most of our best warriors died at Blue Waters, and those who survived have joined other masters. We have perhaps 3,000 cavalry remaining, and they demand payment in silver that we no longer possess. The empire of Genghis Khan's heirs is dying, and everyone can see its death throes. The systematic collapse of the Golden Horde following the Battle of Blue Waters represented one of the most rapid imperial disintegrations in medieval history. Within a decade of Algirdas's victory, the vast empire that had dominated Eastern Europe for over a century had fragmented into a collection of competing khanates, whose individual power was insufficient to challenge any major external enemy. The economic foundations of horde power, already weakened by years of civil war, completely collapsed when Lithuanian victories eliminated the tribute-paying territories that had provided the empire's primary revenue sources. The agricultural regions of Ukraine and the trade routes connecting Europe with Asia fell under Lithuanian control, depriving the horde of both immediate income and long-term economic prospects. The military disintegration that followed Blue Waters accelerated as experienced warriors abandoned the failing imperial structure in favor of regional leaders who could offer better prospects for employment and advancement. The decimal system of military organization, which had once made Mongol armies invincible, became impossible to maintain when units could no longer be properly equipped, supplied, or coordinated across the fragmenting empire. The political fragmentation of the Golden Horde into competing ulus intensified as different branches of the Mongol ruling family pursued independent strategies for survival. The traditional succession system, which had always contained potential for conflict, became completely dysfunctional when central authority could no longer enforce decisions or prevent rival claimants from establishing independent power bases. The psychological impact of the Lithuanian victory proved as devastating as its immediate military consequences. The myth of Mongol invincibility, which had been crucial for maintaining control over vast populations, was permanently shattered when news spread that forest warriors had systematically destroyed the finest cavalry force in Eastern Europe. Subject populations who had endured Mongol rule for generations began questioning whether continued submission was necessary. The administrative collapse that accompanied political fragmentation made it impossible for remaining Mongol authorities to maintain effective governance over their reduced territories. The sophisticated bureaucracy that had once managed complex logistical challenges across vast distances required stable political authority and substantial financial resources. As central control weakened, local administrators began operating independently or abandoning their positions entirely. The alliance systems that had once provided the Golden Horde with additional military resources and diplomatic support completely broke down as former allies recognized that association with the failing empire offered no advantages. Tributary peoples who had provided auxiliary forces now pursued independent policies or aligned themselves with rising powers like Lithuania and Moscow. The technological and tactical stagnation that had characterized Mongol military development during the 14th century became fatal weaknesses when the empire could no longer afford to maintain traditional advantages. The composite bows and cavalry tactics that had once made Mongol armies superior were neutralized by enemies who had developed effective countermeasures, while financial constraints prevented adoption of new military technologies. The demographic changes that had been occurring within the Golden Horde for generations became insurmountable problems during the post-Blue Waters crisis. The original Mongol conquerors had always been a small minority within their empire, and by the 1360s, they had been completely overwhelmed by the Turkic and Slavic populations they ruled. This demographic reality made it impossible to maintain traditional Mongol political institutions when external pressures intensified. The cultural assimilation processes that had been gradually transforming Mongol identity accelerated during the imperial crisis as traditional institutions lost their effectiveness. Mongol elites who had adopted sedentary lifestyles and Islamic religious practices found themselves increasingly disconnected from the nomadic traditions that had once provided the empire's military and political foundations. The territorial losses that followed Lithuanian expansion created a cascade of additional problems as remaining Mongol territories became increasingly difficult to defend. The loss of buffer zones and strategic positions made remaining territories vulnerable to attack from multiple directions, while reduced resources made it impossible to maintain adequate defensive forces. The succession of weak leaders who claimed authority after the Blue Waters disaster proved incapable of implementing the radical reforms that might have enabled imperial recovery. The political skills and military capabilities that had characterized earlier Mongol rulers were replaced by incompetence and infighting that accelerated the empire's decline. The international isolation that resulted from evident imperial weakness eliminated the diplomatic advantages that had once enabled the Golden Horde to play different enemies against each other. European powers that had once feared Mongol retaliation now viewed the fragmenting empire as an attractive target for expansion rather than a serious threat. The economic alternatives that might have enabled imperial survival were eliminated by territorial losses and political fragmentation. The trade networks that had once generated enormous wealth required political stability and security that the declining empire could no longer provide, while agricultural productivity in remaining territories was insufficient to support effective resistance to external pressures. The military recruitment that had once provided steady supplies of high-quality warriors became impossible when the empire could no longer offer attractive terms of service. Young men who might have joined Mongol armies in earlier generations now sought opportunities with rival powers that offered better prospects for advancement and material rewards. The final collapse of the Golden Horde eliminated one of medieval Eurasia's most significant political entities while creating opportunities for the rise of new powers throughout Eastern Europe. The power vacuum left by Mongol decline enabled the expansion of Lithuania, Moscow, and other regional centers that would reshape the continent's political geography. The end of the tribute system that had supported Mongol rule for over a century liberated enormous resources that could now be directed toward local development and military expansion. Former tribute-paying territories gained access to wealth that had previously been extracted by foreign rulers, enabling political and economic development that had been impossible under imperial control. The demonstration that nomadic empires could be permanently defeated by appropriate tactical methods influenced military development throughout Europe and Asia. The Lithuanian victory provided a model for challenging traditional cavalry-based armies while encouraging the adoption of combined arms, tactics that would characterize later medieval warfare. The cultural and religious changes that accompanied the end of Mongol rule enabled the revival of Orthodox Christian political traditions, while creating opportunities for new forms of cultural synthesis. The religious pluralism that had characterized the Golden Horde was replaced by more homogeneous religious communities that would influence regional development for centuries. Chapter 11. The Lithuanian Empire Vilnius, 1380. The wooden capital of Lithuania has been transformed into something unprecedented in European history, the administrative center of the largest state on the continent. In the Great Hall, where tribal chieftains once gathered for seasonal assemblies, Grand Duke Algirdas now receives ambassadors from across the known world, envoys from England seeking alliances, representatives from the Pope offering recognition, merchants from Novgorod requesting trade agreements. The map on the wall tells the story of Lithuanian expansion, from the Baltic Sea to the Black Sea, from the gates of Moscow to the borders of Poland. The Lithuanian eagle now rules over territories that dwarf the kingdoms of France or England. What began as a desperate struggle for survival against Germanic crusaders has become one of history's most remarkable imperial success stories. "Your Highness," announces the court herald, "ambassadors from the Byzantine emperor await your pleasure. They bring proposals for a military alliance against the Ottoman Turks." Jagiella nods regally, his manner reflecting the confidence of a ruler whose power extends over vast territories and diverse populations. But he understands that everything he surveys traces back to a single autumn day in 1362, when his predecessor Algirdas led Lithuanian forces against 3 Mongol commanders on the banks of an obscure river called Blue Waters. The secret weapon that destroyed the Golden Horde had created something far greater: a forest empire that challenges the traditional hierarchies of medieval Europe. The Lithuanian Empire that emerged from the ashes of Golden Horde collapse represented one of the most remarkable political achievements of the medieval period. From its origins as a collection of Baltic tribal confederations struggling for survival, Lithuania had evolved into the largest state in contemporary Europe, controlling territories that stretched from the Baltic Sea to the steppes of southern Ukraine. The administrative system that governed this vast empire reflected sophisticated solutions to the challenge of ruling diverse populations across enormous distances. Rather than attempting to impose uniform Lithuanian institutions, the Grand Duchy developed a federal structure that allowed considerable local autonomy while maintaining effective central coordination. This approach proved remarkably successful for integrating conquered territories into a stable political framework. The military organization that defended and expanded Lithuanian territories built systematically on the tactical innovations that had enabled victory at Blue Waters. The combined arms approaches that had proven effective against Mongol cavalry were refined and expanded to create one of Europe's most formidable military systems. Lithuanian armies could now operate effectively in forest, steppe, and urban environments while maintaining the coordination and flexibility that distinguished their tactical approach. The economic foundations of Lithuanian imperial power derived from the empire's control over crucial trade routes connecting northern and southern Europe. The river systems that flowed through Lithuanian territory provided access to markets from the Baltic to the Black Sea, while agricultural production in conquered Ukrainian territories generated surpluses that supported military and administrative operations. This economic strength enabled continued expansion while building genuine prosperity within Lithuanian territories. The cultural policies that characterized Lithuanian imperial administration demonstrated remarkable sophistication for the medieval period. Rather than attempting forced assimilation, Lithuanian rulers generally preserved and supported local cultural traditions, while encouraging gradual integration into broader imperial structures. This cultural tolerance proved crucial for maintaining stability across territories with diverse ethnic and religious populations. The religious flexibility that had enabled Lithuanian expansion continued to characterize imperial administration as the Grand Duchy grew to encompass Orthodox Christian, Catholic, and pagan populations. Lithuanian rulers maintained their traditional paganism while supporting Orthodox Christianity in former Mongol territories and eventually accepting Catholic conversion when political circumstances required. This religious adaptability prevented the sectarian conflicts that plagued other medieval empires. The diplomatic strategies that supported Lithuanian expansion reflected sophisticated understanding of European political dynamics. Lithuanian rulers formed strategic alliances with Poland against the Teutonic orders while maintaining complex relationships with Moscow, Novgorod, and other regional powers. This diplomatic flexibility enabled Lithuania to avoid isolation while pursuing aggressive expansion policies. The legal systems that emerged within the Lithuanian Empire represented innovative attempts to balance different legal traditions within unified political frameworks. Lithuanian customary law was combined with Slavic legal traditions and remnants of Mongol administrative practices to create legal systems that provided effective governance while respecting cultural diversity. These legal innovations became models for later imperial development. The urban development that characterized Lithuanian territories reflected the empire's commitment to long-term territorial integration rather than simple extraction. Lithuanian administration invested in infrastructure development, trade facilitation, and institutional strengthening that enhanced the economic value of conquered territories, while building local support for continued Lithuanian rule. The educational and cultural institutions that developed within Lithuanian territories reflected the empire's multicultural character and administrative needs. Lithuanian rulers supported Orthodox monasteries, established administrative schools, and encouraged scholarly activity that created intellectual networks spanning the empire. These cultural investments helped build imperial identity while preserving local traditions. The military innovations that continued to develop within Lithuanian forces reflected ongoing tactical evolution and adaptation to new challenges. The success of combined arms approaches encouraged continued experimentation with different types of units and tactical formations, while the empire's expanding territories provided opportunities to test new approaches against diverse enemies. The succession systems that governed imperial authority reflected Lithuanian attempts to balance traditional customs with imperial requirements. The principle of dynastic succession was maintained while establishing institutional mechanisms that could ensure stability during transitions. These succession arrangements proved crucial for maintaining imperial unity across multiple generations. The technological development that occurred within Lithuanian territories reflected the empire's position at the crossroads of European and Asian trade networks. Lithuanian craftsmen combined Western European metallurgical techniques with Eastern innovations to create some of the most advanced military equipment available in the medieval world. This technological sophistication supported continued military superiority while generating trade revenues. The intelligence systems that supported Lithuanian imperial administration built on the reconnaissance capabilities that had enabled the original expansion. Lithuanian administrators maintained systematic information gathering about potential threats, trade opportunities, and internal developments throughout their territories. This intelligence advantage helped prevent rebellions while identifying opportunities for further expansion. The ethnic integration that occurred within Lithuanian territories created new forms of political identity that transcended traditional tribal and national boundaries. Lithuanian imperial citizenship became available to individuals regardless of ethnic origin, creating loyalty to imperial institutions rather than narrow ethnic identities. This inclusive approach proved crucial for long-term imperial stability. The Lithuanian Empire that emerged from the destruction of the Golden Horde represented a fundamental transformation in Eastern European political organization. The federal systems, cultural tolerance, and administrative sophistication that characterized Lithuanian rule created models that would influence political development throughout the region for centuries. The strategic position that Lithuania achieved through its expansion provided the foundation for continued influence in European affairs even after the empire itself underwent transformation. The territories that had been integrated into Lithuanian political structures retained many of the institutional innovations and cultural synthesis that had characterized imperial administration. The demonstration that Fars peoples could successfully challenge and defeat traditional imperial powers influenced military and political thinking throughout medieval Europe. The Lithuanian example encouraged other emerging powers while proving that tactical innovation and political organization could overcome APPARENT, disadvantages in resources or military tradition. The religious and cultural tolerance that had enabled Lithuanian imperial expansion created precedents for managing diversity within political systems that would prove influential in later European development. The federal structures and legal pluralism that characterized Lithuanian administration provided alternatives to the centralized uniformity that characterized most contemporary empires. The legacy of the Battle of Blue Waters thus extended far beyond the immediate destruction of Mongol power to encompass the creation of new forms of political organization that would influence European development for centuries. As we reach the end of this remarkable story, the secret weapon that destroyed the Golden Horde stands fully revealed. It wasn't superior numbers. The Mongols likely had more warriors at Blue Waters. It wasn't better individual fighting skills. Mongol cavalry remained formidable opponents. It wasn't even technological superiority, though Lithuanian crossbows proved effective against traditional horse archery. The secret weapon was something far more powerful and infinitely more rare: the revolutionary integration of tactical flexibility with strategic vision. What Algirdas achieved at Blue Waters represented the culmination of generations of military innovation forced by necessity. Fighting simultaneously against Teutonic heavy cavalry, Russian infantry, and Mongol horse archers, Lithuanian forces had developed something unprecedented: combined arms, warfare that could adapt to any enemy and any terrain. But tactical innovation alone could never have achieved such complete victory. The true secret lay in the strategic vision that recognized when the moment for decisive action had arrived. While the Golden Horde tore itself apart in civil war, Algirdas understood that Lithuania faced a window of opportunity that might never open again. The forest warriors who crossed the Syniukha River that autumn day carried with them not just weapons and armor, but a unified vision of what victory could accomplish. Unlike raiders seeking plunder or fuel levies fulfilling obligations, these were professional soldiers fighting for the transformation of their world. The psychological dimension proved equally crucial. The Lithuanians approached Blue Waters convinced that their tactical methods would prove decisive, while the Mongols fought with the confidence of inherited superiority rather than systematic preparation. When those assumptions were tested in battle, Lithuanian confidence proved justified, while Mongol overconfidence became fatal weakness. The institutional foundations that supported Lithuanian success, the intelligence networks, logistical systems, command structures, and political arrangements represented decades of careful development rather than improvised solutions. The Lithuanian Empire that emerged from Mongol collapse was built on systematic preparation rather than lucky accidents. The destruction of the Golden Horde reminds us that in human affairs, the interaction between preparation and opportunity can produce results that seem impossible in advance. The Forest Kingdom that had once struggled for survival against Germanic crusaders didn't just defeat one of history's great empires. It replaced that empire with something larger and more enduring. The secret weapon that changed the world was the power of unified strategic vision combined with tactical innovation and systematic preparation. That remains as potent today as it was in 1362 on the banks of the Blue Waters.